Paladin's newest champion has just fluttered into the realm, and that is Willow of the Summer Court. Now, it's only currently on the OB49 PTS, and I gathered some of my subscribers to play together on Discord to get this footage along with the training area on the PTS. However, today I'm just going to go over her as a champion, all of her abilities, and what I think of her currently in the game and what things might need changing or might need tweaking. And so there are a few things that have been brought up that people seem to be frustrated about and are worth having a talk over. Now again, I've got to hand it to the art team. I think Willow is a great addition to the realm. It's taking that sort of step towards fantasy again, but this time in a very different way. The fairy herself is almost a bit more like a pagan depiction of a fairy rather than the sort of Disney humanoid Tinkerbell fairies that they have depicted and sort of entered into popular culture. And what I'd say is that actually, like, with the animations added, it almost looks a bit like a platforming character like Spyro, or to go for some of the latest additions, Yooka-Laylee. It's very interesting how she moves around. It's got quite a quirky, cute charm to it that I think is rather cool. Anyway, looks out of the way, let's get on to the nitty gritty. Willow is a damage champion, and at her base she has 2000 HP or health points. And this can be upgraded to 2200 health points with some cards in her deck. Jumping into her abilities, her left click, or her right bumper I guess on controllers, is her Wand of Overgrowth. And this fires a blast of what they call Fey Energy that deals 500 damage every 0.75 seconds. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, and comparing this to some of the other damage dealers, it is rather low. But Willow's attack has quite a large AoE, where she can damage a lot of enemies. It almost isn't clear with how big her blast animation is, which is cool because little vines come out of the ground where you hit, but you do have a lot more damage in an area that you wouldn't quite expect from that animation. Also, there is a legendary card, Blast Flower, and what it does is it stacks 50 damage every time you hit them, up to 5 times, and basically that means that you can do up to 250 extra damage on that champion if you get those consecutive hits in. Now, if you're getting those consecutive hits, you're probably getting close to killing them anyway, so you wouldn't likely get to the maximum damage. But the thing that's good with this legendary card is that you can hit people in the AoE, so if you're hitting on a point and there's 3 people on there, if you're mainly going for one person and then you move on to the next person will already have had that damage stacked onto them, those 5 stacks perhaps, and they'll probably be slightly damaged, and the next shot will be the maximum 750 damage. All in all, the damage from this wand is relatively low compared to other damage champions, but her strength is the AoE like I mentioned. Next up is a ability with quite a bit of controversy, and this is Seedling. What you do is you toss this sort of chestnut, or horse chestnut I think you say, we call it a conker, and it's like a spiky green thing. You throw it down, and then what it does, it explodes after 1 second of a fuse time, and it deals 500 damage. And it also spawns 4 additional seeds that jump out of it in almost like a cross pattern, and each of those also explode for 500 damage 1 second after the first one went off, because they have 1 second fuse as well. Where does this get big? Well, there's a legendary card called Scorn, which gives 350 extra damage on each of the seedlings. Even with the base seedlings, you can do quite a large amount of damage, especially if you throw onto a point, and you can also bounce it off of walls, which is kind of a tactic to get it onto a point or somewhere where you want to attack but you don't want to poke into, or perhaps you want to throw it in and then move around and attack somebody else, which can also be useful. But coming back to this Scorn, it means you're getting 850 damage at maximum, and that's up to 5 times with all of these seeds going off. Worth mentioning is there is damage drop off on these seedlings, and it does seem to be quite steep, and also the range isn't huge, but when it turns into these 4 bombs, it's very difficult to dodge for enemies that don't see it, and I think that's the biggest point here. This attack is in an AoE in sort of a little area, and if you are aware of these seeds and you know what this Willow is going to be doing, you can move away from it. And I think it might be sort of the Skye argument, in that Skye is very good at taking on people that don't have as much map knowledge or knowledge about the champions, and people that go up against a Willow that don't really know what they do, are going to have a hard time, and it might be something that is a bit of a teething problem early on, but definitely with the Legendary Scorn, it can be pretty insane on a point. There are also 2 cards that are in her deck that aren't legendaries that can make this also rather insane. There's one which gives you 10, 20, 30 or 40% cooldown reduction on eliminations, and because Willow hits so many enemies and she is an AoE damage champion, it's quite easy for her to get eliminations, and it can mean that this Seedling can be off cooldown very quickly. There's also Sprouts, which will reduce the cooldown of Seedling by 0.5, 1, 1.5 or 2 seconds if you hit an enemy with Seedling. Now if you do throw a Seedling onto a point, either one of those 5 seeds that come out are likely to hit an enemy, which can reduce the cooldown just that little bit more. I think these cards can make it even more frustrating in the fact that you get the Seedling all of the time, you can spam it, and this might be the area where they have to think again and maybe looking at whether this is actually working out and these cards are too good, or perhaps making the Seedling a little bit worse and making these cards still very viable to work with that Seedling. Willow's escape ability is Flutter, and what this does is it quickly flutters you forwards, and this is the one where I said it had quite a cool animation. It almost looks very platform game-esque, and it propels you forwards and upwards. But what I'd say this is very useful for is when you do it upwards, you're going to get some height so you can come down again, and it's very good for getting onto platforms above of enemies, or getting onto cover that some enemies can't attack that have a very close fire range, like a Torvald. You can go up onto a roof just to avoid them. But in general, as an escape, it is alright. You can still be attacked whilst you're doing it, and it isn't too far of a travel. But if you use it going upwards and get into different areas higher up, I think it's better used that way. You can also chase people down with it. It is almost a bit like Cassie's role in that regard, and generally have enjoyed using Flutter in the matches I've played so far. The next ability, which also had a bit of controversy, is Dead Zone. What this does, it fires out a toxic spore, but it's like kind of like a gas cloud comes out, and there's a ring of where there's this sort of green gassy spores, I guess. And what it does is it prevents all healing in that ring for 4 seconds. And enemies that are affected in that ring that move out of the area cannot heal for 2 seconds. Now there's already quite a bit of bad feelings about how Cauterize works in the game. If you didn't know, Cauterize reduces healing by 30%, 60% or 90% at each level, and you can buy that during the game. It's one of the burn cards. And this ability completely nullifies healing. And not only that, but when it's combined with a legendary card again called Scorched Earth, Dead Zone now damages shields for 50% of their maximum health over 1 second. So if they stay in that ring for 2 seconds, their shield's gone. And especially with a Torvald who can't move out of it, it can pretty much drain them down. And again, Rekka, the card that attacks shields, is another card that's had a bit of frustration with it because of the amount of damage it adds to attacking personal shields and deployable shields and shields in the game. And in general, there's the feeling that there's too punishing for support champions, especially healers, the main healers, and tanks, especially with some big shields. Now again, this one's only a ring, and for players that are aware of it, they can move out of it and avoid it. But the only thing with this ability is that it is pretty much the size of a siege point, and alongside Seedling, which does damage in the sort of area of the size of a siege point, it's very difficult to attack a siege point when both of these are going on. Now, tactically, if you're playing as a team, you kind of want to dodge these two, but like I said before, with the cards for Seedling, they can get those back really quickly. But in general, I think there's like a little bit of thought here, and it'll be interesting to see when it goes actually live how this will play out when it hits all the levels of play. Finally, the big glittery one, the ultimate, is Fey Flight. Now this isn't one of the big game-winning ultimates or the sort of epic explosive ultimates like you get with a Drogo's ulti that can one-hit somebody with the One Punch Man, or the Ruckus Hexafire, or the Androxus Accursed Arm, but it does do something that's quite fun and we don't quite have in the game at the moment. What it lets you do is basically fly. Now you don't fly like a bird or a plane or anything like that, you sort of just no-clip through the map. If you've ever been in a spectator mode in a game, or you've been on something like the Elder Scrolls and you've gone into the no-clip mode, then you'll know what I mean. You sort of travel in a flat plane and can move slightly up and down, but it doesn't exactly feel like flying. On Drogos, going up in the air isn't always the best idea because enemies that have hit scan weapons, which means basically if they have a shot that basically hits as they fire, like bullet, but things like Kinessa and Droxus, Victor, they are more vulnerable up in the air because they're easier to hit, they're not behind cover. But with Willow, because they're faster in the air than a Drogos is, because Drogos initially propels himself in the air and then they thrust, but it's not really as fast as how Willow can move left and right and sort of in a 3D plane, you can sort of dodge a bit better enemy attacks. And once you get vertically above people and you're shooting basically straight down, I think it's hard for enemies to look up and know that you're directly above them, and you can get quite a few kills that way. Again, it's not like a mega ultimate. I think it's just something that you can use quite often in a game, not just for clutch moments or pushes, but just generally to further the gameplay and your team. And maybe like a Cassie ultimate, it's not the end of the world if it goes, but it is still useful. All in all, with all of that, I think I've covered all of the abilities, her design, and some of the cards that I think are actually important and ones that might need a bit of tweaking, and some of the abilities that need thinking about too. I do think there is sort of a teething start and issue to the champions like this, because everyone's not really reacting like they normally would. And in the first footage in my first game, I think people just weren't running away from the seedlings, or perhaps noticing them or looking out for them. And it's easy to shout that something is OP straight away, but I'm very interested what everybody else thinks about this champion. Do you think that their design's great? Do you like what they've done with this? Or perhaps don't you like the fantasy push so much? What do you think about the balancing? Do you think they're frustrating to play with or play against if you have played the PTS? Or do you think they're frustrating from what you've seen in my footage? Do you think that they're perhaps a little bit overpowered or a little bit underpowered? Or do you think that they're in the right place? Be sure to let me know in the comments section below. I'd like to apologise for the lack of videos, but I was in Austin, Texas, and unfortunately this video is a little later, but that's because I was travelling over in an airplane from Austin to London, and then from the car from London back to my own town. So it's been a long haul for me, and if I sound a little bit off, that's probably what it is, because I'm pretty shattered. But I'm definitely going to be doing a live stream a little bit later as well. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this. If you did enjoy it, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more of my content. I've been Joshino, and I'll see you all next time.